So the program Milk with Dignity is born after the need for protections for migrant dairy farm workers. So in the USA, agricultural workers are exempt of many law protections, and with that, also are exempt of the right to unionize. So it was very important for us to start organizing farm by farm.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast Digging Deeper of Stichting Boerengroep Wageningen. This podcast explores agroecological practices in the Netherlands and beyond. As part of the agroecology movement, we fight for a radical change towards a socially and ecologically just food system, and do this by giving a platform to farmers, activists, scientists, students and politicians. We invite you to be part of the movement. In this series, we focus on the marginalized communities in the agricultural sector and bring light to the struggles that are often kept hidden. So without further ado, let's start digging deeper together.
Do you want to dig deeper into the wild world of wild plants and foraging? Listen to the Wildpluk podcast. I am Roos Konings and I'm so lucky to share all this wonderful information about foraging, using and growing wild plants. So, check out the podcast for free on your favorite podcast platform.
In today's episode, we talk about the NGO Migrant Justice and how they organize for workers' rights in Dutch agriculture. Our guests of today are Marita Canedo and Will Lambek from Migrant Justice. Migrant Justice is an organization based in the US state of Vermont that organizes for economic justice and human rights with immigrant farm workers in the region's dairy industry. Both Marita and Will are staff members with Migrant Justice and work on a campaign focused on improving conditions for dairy workers who supply US supermarkets owned by the Dutch company Ahold Delhaize. My name is Lotte and I'll be the host of today's podcast. Welcome, Will and Marita. Very nice you're here. You're working at Migrant Justice. Can you tell me a little bit more about the organizations and also what your role's in there and why you do what you do there?
Sure. So Migrant Justice is a grassroots organization led and founded by immigrant dairy farm workers. They came together after a preventable death of a young farm worker called José Obed Santis in 2009. And that was the spark for the community to start organizing towards human rights. And for years, we've been organizing in farms. Vermont is a very isolated state, very rural. So people get to be very isolated. So the first campaign that we had was access to driver licenses, because then people could have access to food, to health, to see their family friends. And after that win, we went to another campaign, Stopping the Police, to collaborate with immigration enforcement. We call the No Más Polimigra law, and it's something that it really has put our community safer and with more freedom of mobility. But that was just the beginning of building our base. Very important policies. We organize through assemblies, regional assemblies, where people come together and talk about their problems, but also envision collective solutions and put it into action, which could be a campaign or any other change on the legislation. So our organization, horizontal structure, but we're 8 in the staff. My role there is to answer the support line for anybody, and could be, since I need a driver license to help me, I'm being deported, or I just had an accident or anything. And that's the door for the people to start learning about their rights and get involved with the organization and develop leadership. Another role I have is to coordinate the Milk with Dignity program that we will explain more later. That means that make sure that the program is functioning and rolling well.
And my name is Will, and I work with Marita at Migrant Justice. My role is focused on the policy and legislative change, what we call our campaigns against discrimination. Vermont is a state with very few immigrants relative to other areas in the United States, and most of the immigrant community is concentrated on the dairy farms in our state. Dairy milk production is one of the largest industries in Vermont, and it's very important to the history and the culture, as well as to the economy of Vermont. And over the past couple decades, that industry has come to almost entirely rely on the labor of migrants, mostly undocumented migrants, from Mexico and Central America. And that's the community that came together 16 years ago after the death of Jose Obeth to form Migrant Justice. And so in addition to the fights to improve human rights of workers on the farms and improve labor and housing conditions, we also have to stop discrimination by the state and by the authorities against the immigrant community. Because they're so isolated, and because it's so easy to discriminate against them when they leave their farms to go to the store or go to the doctor, we have to take action to stop police discrimination and also to expand access to things like education, healthcare, and housing.
And Marita, you mentioned it already. You have a campaign called Milk with Dignity. Can you tell us a bit more about what's the campaign about?
Sure. So the program Milk with Dignity is born after the need for protections for migrant dairy farm workers. So in the USA, agricultural workers are exempt of many law protections, and with that, also are exempt of the right to unionize. So it was very important for us to start organizing farm by farm. Like Will is sharing, there's discrimination with wages, housing, and any like training or protections against retaliation or even violence. We can say even child labor and human trafficking sometimes. So in order to address this and seeing the lack of protections from the state and the country, the community decided to create their own program. And the Milk with Dignity program, what it does, it brings an analysis of the supply chains, and with that brings the corporations at the top of the supply chain to sign an agreement to just source from farms that are gonna comply with a set of standards created by the workers. The money that they pay to the farms is gonna be used only to be successful with the standards. This money and the farms are audited and monitored by a third-party monitoring body, a Standards Council. Investigators that the only job that they have is to work in the farms that are under the program. So they audit the farms, they monitor the farmers, they have a 24/7 support line for workers, managers, and farm owners. There are education sessions in each farm, so everybody knows about the rights and responsibilities. And all this comes into a legal agreement between the corporations and Migrant Justice to make sure that there is transparency in their supply chain, and then they are responsible for economic redistribution because they are profiting from the abuses in the farms. We have implemented the program in Ben & Jerry's supply chain in the USA after many, many years of campaigning and having protests and pickets and telling the stories of workers. Now that we know that the program is successful and we have numbers and data and stories of real change, we want the expansion. So after an analysis of different corporations and different supply chains, we decided to invite Hannaford Supermarkets, that's a chain of supermarkets in the Northeast region of the USA, to join the program. Hannaford Supermarkets is part of Ahold Delhaize here in Amsterdam. You know, it's the parent company. And part of the strategy is putting pressure through the parent company so they can really understand and address the violation of human rights for the workers in their supply chain.
And what the listeners might not know yet, but you two are in the Netherlands right now for a week because it's a special occasion, because the shareholders meeting of Ahold Delhaize took place. What happens behind the scenes of Ahold Delhaize?
Yeah, so Ahold Delhaize is, as your listeners will know, the owner of Albert Heijn. But what many people don't know is that most of their sales are from their US-based supermarkets. So they own a number of supermarkets in the United States, and that's the majority of the revenue and the profits that Ahold gets, which is what brings us to the Netherlands, because as a publicly traded company, they have something called an annual general meeting. That's a meeting that is open to all of their shareholders, where the board of directors and the executives have to report on the company's year and make projections for the future, and then shareholders get to ask them questions. We've been organizing with investors in the United States, with shareholders of Ahold, and we're able to get an invitation into this meeting through what are called proxy votes. Basically, a shareholder lent us their vote in order to get into the meeting. So we were present this week when the board of directors and all the executives gathered together, and we were able to ask them directly about the human rights violations in their dairy supply chain, the abuses that are happening against workers on the farms producing milk for Hannaford Supermarket, which is owned by Ahold. And then that forces the company to respond in a public forum. They can't just sweep it under the rug. We've engaged in previous years virtually. We've connected through Zoom to ask questions, but this was the first time that we were able to represent the organization in person in the Netherlands at their shareholder meeting. And we feel that it's been successful. We haven't won yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time after many years of campaigning, Ahold has agreed to sit down to meet with farm workers, to hear from them directly about conditions on the farms, and to hear about the solution that farm workers are presenting, which is milk with dignity.
And what kind of conditions do the farm workers want, or what conditions have been discussed?
Yeah, so during all these years of the existence of migrant justice, we had heard about the direct testimonies of workers and the conditions that they face every day in the dairy farms, but also we conducted surveys. So a very recent one, last year in the summer, we conducted more than 200 surveys, and some of the results are that 53% of workers report labor discrimination. 82% of the workers that were surveyed live in substandard employer-provided housing, which creates conditions like crowded trailers, not good insulation, not access to clean water, and sometimes it could be above the parlor or in the barn or maybe an office. So really inhumane conditions. Also, 87% of the farm workers make below $14 per hour, which is the Vermont state minimum wage. And most people are making from $10 to $11 per hour. 77% have been injured on the job. One of the most dangerous jobs because you're working with cows. People get kicked by the cows and also exposed to manure all day. There are a lot of respiratory problems, skin rashes, eye problems. Also, there is no paid sick days. So more than 50% of workers don't have sick days. So if you get sick, you might lose your job. And if you lose your job, you lose your housing condition as well. More than 60% of workers don't have paid vacations. Around 76% do not receive paid holidays. And all workers outside of the program are not protected from retaliation. So if the boss doesn't want them one day or decides to not address any problem, they can be fired immediately.
Yeah, and it's sometimes the conditions are difficult to believe and are really shocking to people who have never heard about them before. There are workers who are in Hannaford's supply chain producing milk for Ahold Delhaize supermarkets who are living in essentially plywood boxes built into the barn. There's one worker who sleeps right above the cow's birthing pen. So when a cow is giving birth, his bedroom shakes. And the conditions sometimes are just so dehumanizing. Violence against workers is a threat that people face regularly, and occasionally there will be serious incidents of violence and assault that send workers to the hospital, and where employers never face any accountability. So workers can be hit, can be shoved, can be kicked. One worker was beaten so badly that she had to go to the hospital, and when her family spoke up about it, they were fired from the farm and faced retaliation because of it. So we don't want to say that these things happen on every single farm, but without the protections of something like Milk with Dignity, these can happen and workers have no recourse.
Did you visit the farms yourself as well, or are you in touch with the migrant workers?
Definitely. Being a grassroots organization means that we have to follow their leadership. Part of our work is to have field organizers And as part of the development of our community, the development of leadership, field organizers were once working in farms. Then they became part of our coordinating committee, which is the group of farm workers that leads the organization goals and campaigns. And now they are organizing their own community. So a big part of our work is visiting the farms, but also getting together in assemblies. Assemblies are the place where people come and share food and talk about their everyday life, but also envision collective solutions and how to put them into action. So that's how we work. It's really important to have workers leading the change.
And so the idea for the Milk with Dignity program came out of that process of assemblies. Workers who had been trying to organize to change conditions farm by farm realized that we could have some successes with this, but there were also these structural barriers to making change. And that's when workers engaged in an analysis of the industry and came upon this theory of social change called worker-driven social responsibility. And that's the idea that it's the corporations at the top of the supply chain that are ultimately responsible for the working conditions within that supply chain. And those are the actors who should be held accountable and who should provide the financial support to make the change that's needed. So workers designed the Milk with Dignity program, led the campaign against Ben & Jerry's to have Ben & Jerry's become the first company to sign an agreement. And then after implementing the program in Ben & Jerry's supply chain, then decided that Hannaford would be the next company to receive an invitation. And we really do say invitation because this is something created by workers for workers, but it's also something that benefits the companies themselves, because it is not in Ahold's interest for customers to associate their products with human rights violations, with violence against workers, with inhumane housing conditions. That's not anything any company wants. So what Milk with Dignity offers is transparency in their supply chain and verifiable results from an independent monitoring body that's created by the workers themselves. And so customers can buy milk knowing that that the milk is being produced in humane conditions where workers are respected and where their dignity as human beings is recognized.
And you're looking back on the shareholders meeting positively. What are the next steps now for the Milk with Dignity campaign?
Yeah, so we look at it positively because for the first time in all these years, they offer a meeting, and also they are going to be conducting some investigation that I think is going to be the opportunity to prove them that this is the way to really care about the human rights and be doing the due diligence that they have to do. I think what we expect is to have a meaningful meeting where they are not only checking a box as like an audit and say that they consulted with us, but truly talking to farm workers and understanding that this solution that is created by migrant workers benefits all the workers. We have farms under the program that don't have any migrant worker, so it's not only for migrant workers, also benefits the farmers, giving them the economic incentive and relief because the prices of milk is still very low. Farm owners can really improve their labor conditions, and there's less turnover. They don't have to keep training people every time. There is better communication with the workers. And as Will is saying, the company really benefits with this. And good example is like there was an article in the New York Times about child labor in different supply chains, and Ben & Jerry's was named on that article. But they were able, because they are part of the program, to respond and say that this is addressed in their supply chain and in a positive way. So that's a win for the company to say, like, they can prove that the product is coming with real human rights. And we hope that this meeting is really meaningful and caring for the rights of the people.
Yeah, this is the first time that Ahold is beginning to recognize the real problem of persistent and systemic human rights violations in their dairy supply chain on the farms producing Hannaford brand milk. But I want to emphasize that it's only the beginning. They still are not recognizing the full scale of it, but they've opened the door and have now recognized in front of all of the company shareholders that they need to look into it more. They will be conducting an assessment, and that Migrant Justice and the farm workers themselves need to be involved in that assessment. But recognizing the problem is just the first step. Because for years now, Ahold Delhaize, like many companies, when they have a public relations crisis on their hands, they look for a public relations solution. And so they've rolled out many different initiatives to try to trick consumers into thinking that they are taking real steps to address human rights problems. But those have all failed for one simple reason: they haven't involved the workers themselves. We're glad that the door is opened, but it's not enough just to recognize the problem. They have to understand that the solution is in front of them, and the only thing they need to do is trust the farm workers in their supply chain to bring the solution.
My name is Marita Canedo. I'm coming to represent dairy farm workers, migrant farm workers in the USA. We are part of Ahold Delhaize supply chain, and workers are facing inhumane conditions because they don't want to bring what they say about their human rights due diligence. Migrant farm workers are facing 80 hours per week without a day off. They don't get sick days. They don't take time to rest. They are living in houses that are crowded without enough insulation or clean water. Farm workers in the USA are not allowed to unionize, but they bring all the stories and the testimonies, creating a real solution to Ahold Delhaize supply chain that is called Milk with Dignity. So we come from the farms to their offices to ask them to have a meaningful dialogue, to listen to farm workers with Milk with Dignity solutions that are standards, monitoring, and the only thing that they have to do is commit economically because they have billions of money that they are throwing away. What do we want?
Milk with dignity!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Milk with dignity!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Milk with dignity!
So you also joined the demonstration at the headquarters this week. How was the atmosphere there?
Yeah, we felt very happy and supported by having other groups from the Netherlands joining us and also chanting, and we were able to share information about the program with the people in the building. Security was waiting for us, which shows that we are doing a good job because they are afraid that more people know about the reality in their supply chain and what we are asking. It's something that it works. They made us wait for a long time, and finally they accept one of us to get inside. We had thousands of postcards that were collected during the campaign from consumers and also workers telling them to join the program. So I was able to get in with the box of all these postcards and present it and give it to them one by one. And they said that they were going to make sure that those goes to the right person. Yeah, but they try to intimidate us. They try to ignore us. But I think they are realizing that we're not going to be quiet, and we have the big responsibility to bring the voices of workers. So we're doing that.
There's also another reason why you're in the Netherlands. You're also submitting a human rights complaint.
That's right. On Monday, farm workers submitted a human rights complaint against Ahold Delhaize with the Dutch national contact point of the OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises, which is a very long way of saying that Ahold has committed to being a quote-unquote socially responsible company, and our complaint shows that they are breaking that commitment. And so there's a body within the Dutch government that is tasked with investigating when companies don't meet their commitments under these guidelines. And we have submitted a complaint with that body. This isn't the same as a court. It won't have a binding resolution, but it is an important step in the campaign. And this is a body that can bring Ahold into mediation with farm workers to reach a resolution. Our hope, though, is that that won't be necessary. We hope that Ahold Delhaize and its subsidiary Hannaford will avoid the embarrassment of an international human rights investigation by committing to take workers seriously, to sit down and talk about the Milk with Dignity program.
And in the Netherlands, the Agroecology Network is now trying to find a way to connect a bit more with labor migration and the topic and all like the scandals around it. How can migrant justice build a link with the agroecology movement?
I think there are many ways to connect the dots. You know, we're not talking only about migrant workers, but migrant workers in agriculture that is very exploitative. Not only about the environment and the animals that are being damaged, but the people become numbers and assets and just profit. So I think it's very important to connect the alternatives that we can create, because the system is not bad. It's working perfectly to exploit people and really take all the resources that we have. So I think with the agroecology movement, there is an opportunity there to have a bigger fight.
Yeah, in our week here, there have been tremendous connections with the Dutch Agricu network, with environmental groups like Milieu Défense, with FNV, the labor union, academics and activists across the country. And we have really felt the solidarity from Dutch civil society in this campaign, because we know that exploitation and abuse are global issues, and we are dealing with a global system. How is it that a company based in the Netherlands can be violating the human rights of immigrant farm workers who are from Mexico and working in the US? So if these systems that we're fighting against are global, our resistance has to be global as well. And that's why it's so important to build these linkages of solidarity across country. Just like in the Netherlands, the United States, of course, has a new right-wing government, and Donald Trump came into office threatening to deport millions and millions of immigrants. The machinery of mass deportation isn't something new in the United States, and it's not something unique to Trump or to one political party. This is something that the government has been doing for decades. Criminalizing, detaining, and deporting immigrants, separating families is part of the fabric of US politics, and it's not something new. However, under Trump, we are seeing an increase in government repression against immigrant communities, and we're seeing frequently members of our community, members of our organization, who are being arrested by immigration authorities outside their homes, on their way to work, going to the supermarket. And this creates a real crisis of fear in the community. Ultimately, the reason why governments do this is to maintain and control an exploitable labor force. They want a labor force of immigrants who are scared, who don't want to speak out, who are worried that if they advocate for their rights, they can be swept up and detained and deported. And so as immigration enforcement in our country gets worse, that means that labor exploitation and abuse becomes more severe as well. So for Migrant Justice, the fight for immigrant rights and the fight for workers' rights is one and the same. We can't separate them.
And as a final question, I mean, we've been talking about the multinationals, big supermarkets, agriculture and labor migration, but maybe as a take-home message for the listeners, what can a consumer do in this case? How can you contribute?
A consumer has the big power of bringing their money to these corporations, and because they are buying a product, they can really organize and ask these corporations to bring their products without these abuses, because nobody wants to eat violations of human rights, nobody wants to eat abuses of discrimination or forced labor or child labor or sexual harassment and sexual violence. Follow the grassroots organization, listen to the experts in the field that are the workers that are bringing solutions, and really get together into this fight to ask and demand for products that are following worker-driven social responsibility models.
Yeah, there's a phrase in English, and I'm not sure if it'll translate into Dutch, but we say, you are what you eat. And if the food that you're eating is coming from conditions where workers are being abused, are being exploited, are subject to violence and sexual harassment and assault, then what does that make us as consumers? So we must take action, and at the same time, we must take action collectively. There's sometimes the belief that if you just change the product that you shop, then you're doing your part as a consumer. That's not the case at all. That's what they want you to think, that individual choice is going to be how you can express your political viewpoints. But no, we need to act collectively, and that's exactly what the Milk with Dignity campaign represents. And that's what the Dutch Agricu network and Migrant Justice have been doing this week by bringing the fight to Ahold Delhaize, whether it's at the annual general meeting of shareholders or to the company's headquarters. And I'll end with another quote that we use a lot in the organization, that the cows don't milk themselves.
The cows don't milk themselves. Thank you both so much for your time. Have a good trip back to the US coming week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to speak with you.
Get down! Milk with Dignity's coming to town! Get up! Get down! Milk with Dignity's coming to town! Get up! Get down!
In this episode, I talked with Marita and Will from Migrant Justice about their work and the events they attended in the Netherlands. If you want to know more about the work they do at Migrant Justice, check out the website link in the description. If you want to know more about the Boerengroep Wageningen, the organization behind this podcast, you can find our details in the description as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. If you have any questions or if you want to reach out to this podcast, feel free to send us an email to podcast_diggingdeeper@outlook.com.